Thank you. Any other comments? Brings us to our last item on the information agenda. It is a proposed resolution. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's the item that we substituted earlier. It's a continuing resolution in support of a safe and inclusive environment for all students and employees and a more inclusive Virginia Human Rights Act. And I guess I should read the item and then discuss.
Yeah, I think we need to, particularly since we don't have it on the screen, and I'd appreciate your presenting it.
Not an issue. The resolution reads, whereas the mission of the school division states, the Virginia Beach City Public Schools, in partnership with the entire community, will empower every student to become a lifelong learner who is responsible, productive, and engaged citizen within the global community. And whereas the school division, to accomplish this mission, staff and other stakeholders must find the educational environment welcoming, engaging, and free from those influences that disrupt students from educational pursuits. And whereas the school division is committed to providing an educational and work environment that prohibits discriminatory or harassing conduct, and to adopting policies and regulations that prohibit unlawful harassment, discrimination, bullying, or other conduct that disrupts the learning environment for students or prevents employees from performing their duties. And whereas the school board acknowledges that including sexual orientation and gender identity as a prohibited basis for discriminatory or harassing conduct would benefit the school division by recruiting and retaining qualified personnel and enhancing student safety. And whereas the Virginia Human Rights Act does not explicitly protect students and employees of the school division from unlawful harassment and discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. And whereas the school board may lack the authority to adopt policies or regulations that would enlarge the basis for unlawful, discriminatory, or harassing practices enumerated in the Virginia Human Rights Act, Code of Virginia 2.2-3900, until amended accordingly by the Virginia General Assembly. And now therefore be it resolved that Virginia Beach City Public Schools remains committed to an environment free from unlawful harassment and discrimination for stakeholders in this school division, and the school board supports amending the Virginia Human Rights Act, Code of Virginia 2.2-3901, to include sexual orientation and gender identity as unlawful basis for discriminatory or harassing practices. And the school board directs the superintendent to explore concerns that students, staff, and stakeholders may have concerning how sexual orientation and gender identity affect the educational and work environment, and to report to the school board the findings and suggestions for addressing those issues. And an editor's note citing this resolution shall be incorporated by reference in School Board Policy 4-4 and School Board Policy 5-7. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be spread across the official minutes of this school board, and that the clerk is directed to send copies of this resolution to the Governor of Virginia, the duly elected members of the Virginia House of Delegates, and Virginia Senate representing the city of Virginia Beach. And as this is information today, it will be up for action on the 19th of November. I really want to thank Dr. Magula and Ms. Linetti, Ms. Allen, Ms. Alexander for keeping up with the moving target that this issue has been. Of course, we started out talking about this and changing policy, then decided that wasn't the way to go. Then we started talking about it as a legislative agenda item, and that really started the public debate over this. And I really want to thank every member of this board, my colleagues, for the discussion and debate that took place following that. Especially want to thank Mr. Tenko for taking verbiage from myself and from Ms. Linetti and kind of piecing it together and editing it right up until the beginning of this meeting so we can present it on the information agenda. There's a fine legal line about our ability to expand protections to include sexual orientation and gender identity in our student anti-harassment policies, and legal opinion differs. Our legal counsel here believes that we do not have the authority to, under the Constitution of Virginia and Virginia law. Whether or not other legal minds disagree is not really our issue. That's the counsel that we've received, and we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing in the right way. So we want to stay on this side of that legal line. The legal line for employment non-discrimination is a bit more clear. There's established legal opinion that states that that is a place that school boards and other public bodies just don't have the authority to do. That may change. Law may change, opinions may change, but as it stands right now, that's the legal opinion. And in talking to my colleagues and in talking to members of the community who are concerned about stepping over that legal line, we decided that the compromise was this resolution. To make it clear that we do not tolerate harassment or discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity in employment or in our schools. That's where this resolution comes from. I'm happy about the compromise. I think this goes about as far as we can without crossing over that line. I think it takes care of what the legislative agenda item would have and letting our legislators know that we support the amending of that law to where one day we can actually change our policies and it won't just be a noted continuing resolution. So I thank everyone for their work and their contributions to discussion and debate on this. And yeah, I'll end there.
I need a second. We have a second? Oh, yeah, that's right.
Information.
Yep, we're on information. Good. Mrs. Holtz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be supporting this resolution because at the moment, this moment in time, that's the best we can do and reach consensus. But I would like an opportunity to make a statement. I join my friends and some of my colleagues and hundreds of thousands of faculty and staff and students in wholeheartedly endorsing the adoption of sexual orientation as part of the Virginia Beach City Public Schools non-discrimination policy, as well as supporting amending the Virginia Human Rights Acts. Bullied GLB students have increased lately. It's in the news. We see it every day, and it comes with increased truancy rates. It has been said in the past, well, how does this affect education? It does affect truancy. Depression, suicide, feelings of victimization that we really don't know how to address, and drug use. Studies show that GLBT students who have not supported are more isolated, they're socially disengaged, they leave school with lower grades, and are more likely to have failed a course. And gay male students have lower GPAs than their heterosexual peers. This suggests that homophilic bullying not only affects students emotionally, but academically as well, and that's where we should be concerned. With higher risk of developing any of these behaviors, how can a GLB student possibly develop a positive sense of self? How can we, as elected adults of this community, protect these children? At our last meeting, there was some discussion, and people made comments, and I'd like to comment on their comments. Some feel that by fully enumerating this policy that includes sexual orientation, it is not needed, because they believe it's already covered under existing policies. The fact is that while some administrators may interpret current policy that way, others do not. I'm one of them. Virginia Beach Schools policy in this matter should be explicit and unambiguous, not implicit and subject to interpretation as it is now. Some believe that sexual orientation should not be included because it would open the door to other more frivolous additions. This is logically misleading. While it's always possible that other groups may seek protection, each request would be carefully weighed and considered in the same way that this one has been. Decisions must be made on case-by-case basis, and also it should be noted that the thousands of organizations, institutions, and businesses that have adopted sexual orientations as part of their non-discrimination policies have not been deluged by frivolous requests for inclusion. Adding sexual orientation is the right thing to do. Doing it will formalize the policy, and it will protect gay and lesbian students. Unfortunately, tonight, we're only considering it as a footnote. It's my hope in the future that it will, but at least this is a step forward. And it's my hope in the future that we will include it in our policy, change our policy in Virginia Beach schools and include it not just as a footnote. Also, I look forward to the future when our Virginia legislators, and hopefully there will be change in the future. I read something in the news today about that the legislators will also change the policy themselves to amend the Human Rights Act. So locally, I look forward to the time when we will no longer ever be talking about this. There are many issues that we do have to agree on, and we have to compromise. This is not one of those. I don't think rights of students should ever be compromised. It's not the same as Labor Day profits at the beach. So I'm accepting this, and I'm hoping that one day we will have the conversation again, and we are just a little bit closer to receiving 100% status for these students. Thank you.
Mr. Malati.
I kind of wanted to take a moment to put this in perspective. In the 50s and 60s, they did studies. I think it was called the Kinsey Report. In the 50s and 60s, they decided through these surveys that they took that 10% of the population of the United States was gay. More contemporary reports put that number at 3.5%. But let's do some simple arithmetic, because sometimes numbers, I think Dr. Robertson can attest to this, numbers speak louder than words. If you multiply 70,000 students times 3.5, you get 2,400 odd human beings. If there was another group of 2,400 odd human beings that petition this board or anyone for recognition based on discrimination, be hard-pressed, wouldn't we, to just ignore that or just say, well, there are really that many people, or, well, I can't tell you how pleased I am that we're doing the right thing. So I want to echo Dottie and Joel, and I'm sure someone who will speak after me, and saying thank you for doing the right thing. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mrs. Williams.
Three weeks ago, 11 of us were about on six or seven different areas in this debate. You know, it wasn't just an even split. We all had our opinion, and we all had our reasons, and we were all trying to be fair. So I just want to say I think this is an excellent, and I don't even know if I would call it compromise, because it does a great deal, Joel, in your resolution. But I will. I think it's an excellent compromise, because I think that there is a right way to do things, and I think as educators, we cannot overlook the fact that if something is legally not right, just like when our students don't agree with the rule that the teacher says, you know, you have to follow the rule. But there's certain ways that you can then try to address to get the rule changed, but there's a respectful, right, law-abiding, rule-abiding way. So I think this does that. This keeps us to the right of that legal line, and it also does what we intend for it to do, and that is to make sure that all students are protected from bullying, and that our administrators and our teachers and the whole community protects all students and teachers from any kind of bullying. So I would like to again thank Leonard and Joel for putting so much time. We've all put a lot of time on this issue, and I just think that I'd like to thank all my colleagues for coming together and having a lot of talk for these last 3 weeks, and a lot of debate, healthy debate, and a lot of compromising. And I think that's what the board needs to do, and hopefully we can move forward and we can be energized and very optimistic about things that we voted on tonight. So thanks again for all your hard work.
Mr. Tinko.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I wish to thank the members of the public who have shared their thoughts and concerns about this very most important issue. I don't believe this continuing resolution is necessarily a compromise per se, because it gets the most for what we can possibly do within the legal limits of our authority. I know a lot of school board members ask themselves, usually the first questions when any policy comes up, whether it's in the best interest of our students. The question I ask myself when it comes to any policy is whether or not we can actually do it. And what is incumbent upon any elected official or any public official who has the authority to do stuff is to know the the legal extent of what you can be able to do. And having read the Attorney General opinion as well as some of the briefs submitted by the ACLU and Equality, it's so very specific from the Attorney General's opinion, the one I'm staring me in my face right now, that says local governing bodies have only those powers which are expressly granted by the state legislature, those powers fairly or necessarily implied from expressly granted powers, and those powers which are essential and indispensable. I think that if we were to simply move forward in adopting a policy creating an enumerated class or non-discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, we do a great disservice and forego a teaching moment about our system of governance in Virginia and how local government works. If the General Assembly does not give us an express grant of authority, then we can't do it, and we act outside the scope of our authority. And it's important, and it's critically important, especially when you see things going on in Washington, D.C., and even in the General Assembly in passing that unconstitutional OEI law, that they need to know what the laws are. And I think that everyone wants to see a particular change on every level to be able to recognize the importance of including sexual orientation and gender identity as an improper and unlawful basis for forms of discrimination. I personally believe that. I mentioned last school board meeting that when I was in college at James Madison that I was a women's studies minor and that I was a communications intern at the National Organization for Women in Washington, D.C. And what I learned from those experiences, as well as several others, and continuing on with the dialogue with members of our community and those who have been personally impacted, as well as families who have lost someone because they just were too afraid to come out, that this continuing resolution is something that is going to that clearly and unequivocally states that we are in favor of a more inclusive environment, irrespective of one's sexual orientation and gender identity. That we are, in fact, committed to an environment where you are free from those forms of impermissible prejudices. And one thing that this continuing resolution has that the legislative agenda package lacks is the fact that this has a concrete policy recommendation. And it's something that we don't have to talk about. Well, I don't say talk about, but something that doesn't have to be brought up every single year when we talk about what is proposed before the General Assembly. This directs the superintendent, or respectfully invites, to explore concerns that students, staff, and stakeholders may have concerning how sexual orientation and gender identity affect the educational and work environment, and to report to the school board those findings and suggestions for addressing those issues. And that is something that is concrete, that lacks, that is not part of the legislative agenda. Now, with respect to the policy change, I'm going to go back to that again. As an attorney, I was called a coward for not simply just moving forward and just changing the policy. The biggest fear that I have is that it opens us up to some various forms of unforeseen liability, and at the very best, it's simply an illusory policy. I don't want to have policies on the books that are just simply there for show. And I think that this continuing resolution shows that as we evolve as a society, so can our laws. And the real attention should be brought toward the federal government, who has the power to pass constitutional amendments, or the Virginia General Assembly, which can amend the Virginia Human Rights Act, which says, which is clearly stated in our continuing resolution, and it'll continue until there are school board members subsequent to us who vote to take that away. And I'm glad that this has some level of permanence, and we can rest assured that Virginia Beach City Public Schools are doing everything, that we're doing everything that we possibly can, and our response to all students, regardless of all of the enumerated classes that I'm not going to get into. But I do thank Mr. McDonald, and thank you, Ms. Milletti, for going at least through at least a dozen versions of this resolution to get it at least what I feel is near perfect. And I believe that it's better than any of the proposals that have come forth in the past 3 weeks. And last but not least, I thank my fellow school board members for eliciting what I believe is a very constructive dialogue, because if it weren't for a lot of the courage to bring this out to the forefront, then we would not have this discussion and not being able to raise awareness about what, I believe is a very important issue. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mrs. Taylor?
At the risk of repeating, I think this is not a compromise that we've come up with. I think it's a very important resolution, and I think it's very important that all of our students can go to school every day, and all of our employees, and feel comfortable in their work environment and not be subjected to bullying. And I think this is the right way to go. We're within the legal limits of the law at this point in time, and it is not a temporary resolution that just stands for a few months. It's being referenced in our policies, which is what we can do right now as we urge the state to go ahead and change the Human Rights Act. So I'm going to support it.
Mr. McDonald.
Understandably, this is a really important issue to gay-straight alliances in high schools around our city, and I just wanted to recognize and welcome members of the Bayside High School GSA who are here today, and leaders from Bayside High School and Salem GSAs, and for their support and input.
Thank you. Also, sincerely appreciate the guidance we received and the presence of the representatives from the City Human Rights Council. Father Park, certainly appreciate your being here. Yeah, I don't like the word compromise either, because we are not compromising the issues relative to the students. It is a procedural compromise, but the words are there, the asterisk is there in the policy, the dialogue we've had over the last couple of weeks should make it abundantly clear where we are on this, and for all of that, I thank everyone. So, it will... Pardon?
Just one last thing I would like to confirm the legal sufficiency of this continuing resolution as the way it stands to our legal counsel.
Now, the further changes, some I can support.
Thumbs up. That's all I want to confirm.
Mr. Tenko, I learned a long time ago, you never ask a question unless you're prepared to deal with the answer. And I'm not sure you were. That concludes the consent agenda, or the information agenda. Do we have committee reports? All right. Do appreciate the students that were here with us tonight. We always look forward to an opportunity to dialogue as we adjourn. If you want to share any of your thoughts on things at school. We are adjourned.